We're doing the show early today. Breaking news right off the top as Ken Rosenthal gives us more here. 3 years, $126 million for what everyone expected. Bo Bichette signing with the Mets to play third base. No deferrals, opt-outs after years 1 and 2. Also, the deal includes a $5 million opt-out bonus. That means in one season, Bo Bichette can make $47 million to play a position that he's never played before for the Mets. The ultimate pivot after they lose out on Kyle Tucker. And Ken pointed out maybe they trade Brett Beatty, or there's been some things about him potentially being a super utility or maybe playing more first base as they signed Polanco, but he's going to do a lot of DH. Anyway, Scott Braun, Erik Kratz, Trevor May. We're going to talk to Ken a little bit later, among others, but let's dive right in. Trevor, your former team, the Mets, does not like to wait long when they lose. That's Steve Cohen, richest owner in sports, going, I will place my money here.
Yeah, we saw it happen a little bit with the Red Sox the other day with Ranger Suarez too. Like, they have someone waiting in the wings usually, and it gives them an opportunity to either up the deal if they need to, or just like pull the trigger the next day. So we've seen it happen a couple times very recently. Yeah, it surprised me a little bit. I thought the Phillies were the best fit. Honestly, I put all my chips in on that one. But you know what? We are wrong. I've been doing this for 2 years now, wrong pretty much every single time. So big deal. It's another one of those kind of like bridge deals. We're seeing them a lot more. It's very interesting with the opt-outs after each year, really high AAVs, but shorter time periods. It's going to be interesting to see. We've seen him play second for the first time in the World Series, and that seemed to work out. But now third base seems like now something he's got to learn as well. I don't know if it translates as well over there, but the Mets want their guy. They mostly get their guy.
That sounded like a vote of confidence. I want to see what Giraffe Neck Mark has to say about that. Mostly got their guy. They got rid of a couple other guys. Is this a needle mover? Absolutely. Does this fit in the parameters of what the Mets want to do? What I think David Stearns wants to do with Uncle Stevie's money, going, hey, spend this money. Like, let's go get somebody. They went and got the best guy available for what their need is. Does this preclude them? Does this not allow them to go get Cody Bellinger? Totally other topic, but we'll see. Bo playing third base, to me, is that value? Is his first step quickness where they're going to unlock some value? Is this just a best player available, will find a spot? Is this also a prequel to what they're going to be doing with a Brett Beatty? We always talk about, hey, we're going to keep all this talent around. The reason they lost last year, the reason they had the season they didn't make the playoffs, was not because of third base, was not because of Pete Alonso at first base. It's because they couldn't pitch. Does this move enable them to find that pitcher that will put them over, to put them in the playoffs, and then see what happens from there? But to me, Bo Bichette on this contract for $47 million, coming off a very good platform year, the fact that he's getting $2 more million than what Alex Bregman got last year, and Alex Bregman almost has twice the career WAR in his career, is interesting. And to me, it's a pivot that not getting Tucker shows that the Mets a little desperate. I mean, maybe that's a bad word to say, but a little desperate.
Desperate's okay. Desperate's usually good for fan bases. They want desperate. And it's funny how the Mets were like run prevention, defense, Bo out of position at third, Jorge Polanco out of position potentially at first base. But let's get the inside scoop right now. Wow, it's the winter meetings this week. Who knew? Ken Rosenthal, FT Senior Insider, with us right now. Your reaction to Bo Bichette landing with the Mets and the fit?
I was a little bit surprised, for sure. I think we all were. But I understand what the Mets are doing, and certainly we saw the Red Sox pivot after they lost Bregman. They signed Ranger Suarez. The Mets pivoting here. Bichette was not someone that those of us on the outside necessarily connected to them, but they were talking to him, and they do see this as a viable thing for them, obviously. Third base, and they can bounce Beatty around, perhaps first base, maybe in the outfield as well. It is an interesting direction for a team that's been talking about defense all season long. They'll have Bichette out of position at third base. He hasn't played that position before. Jorge Polanco at first base. He hasn't played that position before. They were talking about Kyle Tucker, who has been declining in right field. And yet, this is something that should really benefit them offensively. Bo Bichette is, if anything, an underrated hitter. He's one of the great hitters in the game, hits all kinds of pitching. And he's a guy, too, that along with Polanco will help restore that offense. And Marcus Semion's part of this mix, too. The offense that they've lost with Alonso and Nimmo and, of course, Jeff McNeil as well.
Ken, I just said maybe it's a desperate move by the Mets. Would you use the word desperate, or would you say, you know what, it's just the next one that we had and we had to make the move?
From what I understand, Eric, actually more of the latter, that it wasn't necessarily desperate. They were desperate to get a hitter, yes. Mm-hmm. But when they didn't get Tucker, they had been in contact with Bichette. It's not like they just called him up and said, let's go. This had been going on. And in that sense, they just reacted to the market. What has been stunning has been the turn of events the last, 18 hours or so. I don't know that people necessarily expected Tucker to go to the Dodgers, and I don't know that people ever expected Bichette to go to the Mets. I was on record, well, at least on this show, saying I thought the Phillies were the favorite for Bichette. They were, and then boom, free agency struck. And this is what happens in the open market. We often talk among ourselves at The Athletic, okay, who's in the market for this guy? Who's going to get him? And to some degree, it's folly because things change so quickly. Teams come out of nowhere. And this has been kind of an example of what we've seen over the last how many hours it's been.
You and a couple other insiders said the same thing, that Bo was, it looks like Bo's going to go to the Phillies. Was this a great ploy to get the Mets to pay extra for Bo Bichette by the Phillies?
No, absolutely not. The Phillies wanted Bo Bichette, and that was serious. Bob Nightingale's reported that they were at 7 years, $200 million. That sounds like the proper range from the Phillies for Bo Bichette. What they would want to do, they'd want the lower AAV. But at the same time, it just didn't happen for them. And they're an interesting team too right now because this was a guy that they focused on. They really wanted him. They met with him. They were enthused about it. They obviously made a big offer for him, and yet they didn't get him. So do they now keep Alec Bohm? Do they go out and re-sign JT Realmuto? All these things are in play for them. They are in play and were in play the entire offseason. The question now is, do they try to do something else and maybe just pivot from those guys entirely? It's unclear.
Ken, touching back on the Mets, EK mentioned it at the top of the hour that the hitting wasn't necessarily the issue last year for them. It was the pitching, and they haven't done much in that side of things. So moving forward, we know Framber Valdez is still out there available. Do you see the Mets having spent their money and possibly just kind of leaning on this young crop of highly touted prospects, or is there still room to grab a front-end guy like Framber and then fill in behind him?
Trevor, to me, there's no question they have to add pitching. And as you mentioned, it was the entire reason, for the most part, that they collapsed last season. They had some other issues. They did have some clubhouse dynamics that were off. The offense at times was not there. But really, this was all about starting pitching. So they know this. They know they have to do more. And I would expect maybe a trade and a free agent. I don't know that. I'm just guessing now. But clearly, they are one of the teams in the market for Framber Valdez, who is the top remaining free agent. They are a team that has been in contact with the Milwaukee Brewers about Freddie Peralta. Mackenzie Gore also is available in a trade. I don't know that the Nats would do it within the division. I don't know that they should care about that, but he's out there. So there are ways they can go for pitching still, but the options are really starting to dwindle, to be perfectly honest, with Suarez going off the board.
Who is Who's benefiting the least from this type of contract? We saw Tucker's, and now we saw Bo's today. The short-term massive AAVs, because these AAVs, in my opinion as a player, it's pushing the value, annual average value, way up for players. I get it, it's not as long-term, but when that number moves up, more money's going in the player's pocket while it's not guaranteed for the length. So who's benefiting the most from these short-term AAVs that are so
I would say
huge?
both parties, both sides, both the club and the player. The club, because the commitment's not that long, you're not buying the decline phase. And the player, because he's getting paid at a level that he might have gotten over a 7 or 8 year deal, but he's getting it over a shorter amount of time. And in the cases of both Tucker and Bichette, they can opt out early and go back into the market. And the next two markets in particular are not exactly deep in quality hitters. So there's a benefit both ways here. And we've heard for years, Erik, teams hate long-term deals. They hate buying into the decline phase. Well, this is the way to avoid that. You're paying more money because you're not going long-term. You're paying almost the equivalent of what you might be paying out long-term. But this is a preferred way to go. Look at the Blue Jays, for example, with Tucker. My guess is, and I've heard rumblings to this effect, that they were around 10 years and $350 million, below Vladimir Guerrero Jr. average annual value. That number would make sense. If they were higher, fine. Just for the sake of discussion here, $350 million is a lot more than $240 million. But Kyle Tucker will have every bit of opportunity to get another contract, to opt out of this one and maybe build it that way. He can get to that number in the end, and he gets the short-term benefit of the high AAVs as well. So it's definitely good for the player, and in my view, definitely good for the club.
Yeah, this is interesting that we're seeing this emerge suddenly, more so when teams have been trying to do this for a while. I think back to the Dodgers with Bryce Harper. They were offering a huge number, but Bryce went with the longer years. Ken, the one thing that I want to clarify with fans is that front offices will try and put like a win or whatever their number is, right, against how much money should be worth a win. And this actually matches that a little bit more so, right? Where a player, if he's a 6-win player or whatever, you can put that against, say, 11 million bucks and say, hey, he's worth 66 mil. It sounds crazy, but the way to do it on a shorter term deal can get that done. If it's a longer term deal, it also helps to the team to stretch out the number for the luxury tax implications. So that's what I wanted to ask you about here. Teams like the Dodgers last night, teams like the Mets now in this case, I mean, if you do some quick math, they're essentially paying double for the player, right? It's 47. It's going to turn into about $100 million this year. And no one's feeling bad for Steve Cohen, but just emphasizing that. Do you think teams are considering that, or they're just saying, hey, I don't want to take on the long-term risk under any circumstance. I will take this massive short-term hit?
Teams are obviously making that decision, these big market teams that are able to cut these kinds of deals. And as we get into the collective bargaining negotiations, and I wrote a whole column about this whole situation this morning, we're going to see obviously the fight about, one, a salary cap, which the owners want, and two, if there is no salary cap, then certainly a different conversation about the luxury tax thresholds, the penalties, how they need to be adjusted. So it seems to me teams will pay what they can afford, right? And the Mets and Dodgers clearly feel they can afford this. I'm sure other teams are rather bothered by that. But they are, again, playing within the current rules, obviously. And if they change the CBA, whether it's through a cap or some other restrictive nature, then these teams will have to adjust. I'm sure it would be grandfathered in. It wouldn't happen right away, at least as far as a cap is concerned. But with luxury tax thresholds and penalties, they are adjusted every CBA. If that's the system that remains intact, they will be adjusted again.
Ken, I have a theory, and I like to throw theories out to you because you always have such great insight on them. What I'm noticing about these short-term deals, maybe with the exception of the opt-outs that are heavily favored in the players, these deals are starting to feel very similar to another sport's max contracts. So do you think that this could be the commonality of these happening more often with the really short years with the huge numbers? Do you think that's a little bit of a attempt to swing it towards the way the contracts are set up for say NBA players where I know there's less players and it's a little bit different economics, but it does feel like this might be what deals look more like if there were a cap in play. Does that sound like something that could be happening here?
Trevor, I have not thought of that. And I've got to be honest, I am not as familiar with the cap system in the NBA and the other leagues as I probably should be. But that's because I'm covering baseball all the time and it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
But whatever, no excuse. I don't know that that's the thinking. I don't expect that that would be the way front offices would be looking at it. To me, they're looking at it right now. How do we do this right now? Because we don't know if a cap system is going to be in effect at any point in the near future, even with the CBA expiring December 1st. It might turn out that the owners do not succeed in their quest for a cap, and we retain what is the framework that currently is in place. So it just seems to me teams operate with the thought of how they can best operate within the current parameters of a CBA. I can't imagine, I may be wrong about this, but I can't imagine that they'd be thinking, let's get ready for the cap system. This is going to work for us good. I don't know that that's the case at all.
One basic question for you, Ken, and this is obviously just your opinion. You don't like giving your opinions. Are the Mets better?
It depends on the question.
Are the Mets better at this point in the offseason than they were at the end of last year? Is their lineup better than it was last year? Obviously, a lot of different pieces that they've added in and pieces that they've subtracted.
All right, it's a complicated question for a couple of reasons. One, if you're looking at strictly the players involved, I do believe they're better offensively. I think this combination, Bichette, Polanco, Semien, is at least the equal of Alonso, Nimmo, and McNeil. That said, Alonso was a huge part of what they did. And while Bichette is a different kind of right-handed hitter, it's going to be interesting to see how this all evolves. And Semien is a guy who offensively has been in great decline. He's the worst of the six players, or at least has been in the last couple of years that I just mentioned. So hard to judge from that perspective, but to me, they have regained their footing offensively. Then the question becomes, okay, from a financial standpoint, do these deals make as much sense as they might have for Alonso and Nimmo and, again, McNeil? Now, Alonso is an interesting case because the Mets offered Kyle Tucker $55 million a year. They didn't or wouldn't offer Pete Alonso $31 million a year, which would have matched the Orioles offer. And some people might say, well, why is that? Now, Tucker is a better player. He's certainly a better defender, though he's not a great defender at this stage of his career. But that discrepancy, if you could have had Pete for that much less, then maybe you could have done some of these other things as well. So to the essence of your question, it seems to me that they've regained their offensive equilibrium here. The question then becomes, okay, do they do it at a proper rate? Should they have kept Alonso, who was, of course, a fan favorite? It's a complicated thing, but in terms of sheer run production, which is your question, they should be fine, in my opinion.
What about run prevention, Ken? That's the last one I want to hit with you because that was the key word that David Stearns used when talking about the team. And I think in one of your recent notes column talked about how other teams felt like they were missing something defensively. Isn't it a little bit strange how the infield is starting to formulate? You're going to have everyone out of position. If Brett Baty doesn't get traded, he's going to play some first with Polanco and Bo Bichette at third. Nobody had that on their bingo card entering the offseason.
Yes, and that is certainly a question for the Mets. And as they reshape their pitching staff, if their defense isn't much better than it was last season, then okay, you've reshaped your pitching staff, but you're still from a run prevention standpoint, not where you should be. So when I wrote about Tucker a couple of days ago, I raised the question, hey, what are you doing here when you claim that run prevention was your big thing? You're going for two $50 million corner outfielders? Well, they needed the hitter, and they certainly needed the hitter. We all knew that. They didn't get that hitter. They got another hitter who is going to play, as you mentioned, out of position. So all of these questions, Scott, are entirely fair, and we will see in 2026 whether David Stearns' play here was the right one. We're going to find out. That's the beauty of this sport. It all evolves on the field, and we get our answers there.